So today I am sitting down with Mischa Fisher, and he is an economist with Angie. And I found out about Mischa through an article that he wrote back in 2021, and I thought it was just fascinating, primarily because you don't hear about this type of data for whatever reason. And I thought this was really well thought out. I discussed this data that Mischa wrote about with some of my HVAC refrigeration industry insiders, and they were actually shocked. They knew that this stuff was going on as far as shortages in trades and things like that, but it was very helpful for them to see this article that Mischa put out there. So welcome, Mischa. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Martin. Likewise, thanks for having me on and looking forward to the conversation. The reason we put this research out there is so it's useful to people. So that's the best feeling in the world, is making sure that it's not just going somewhere and nobody's reading it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into your background real quick. So you're an economist. You work with Angie. Give the folks out there a little bit of background on your background and how your interests go with respect to skilled trades and kind of the backstory on this article. What's your history?
Sure. Yeah. The role of economist is a pretty unique one. You don't encounter it a lot in the trades. And I like to sort of jokingly say that's because the trades is very focused on useful, tangible things, and economists don't have the best reputation on that front. But my role is to hopefully try and be as useful to the industry as possible. As chief economist at Angie, mostly what I do is I look at what's going on in the market. I also work on some internal statistical things for the company on a sort of an ad hoc basis, but mostly my job is to make sure that the company is contributing to the marketplace of ideas and that we're helping the industry grow and thrive with as much information as possible. And the way we tackle that is basically taking the market and putting it into four different pieces. We look at what's going on with consumers and their spending and their priorities. We look at what's going on with pricing on jobs and materials. We look at what the overall market is doing in terms of its size and growth rate. And then we, of course, look at pros, because pros is how all of those other things happen. The way I came to Angie, I actually had a very similar role. Before this, I was the chief economist for the state of Illinois, looking specifically at labor force training, workforce incentives, housing policy, and overall economic growth. And the background for economists is typically one that is pretty heavy on applied stats, and then also thinking through a lot of public policy levers. And if you go back to the early era of the field, it was political economy. So we didn't actually separate out the policy and the political process from economics. Now they're kind of two distinct fields, but they are still closely related, because public policy is in the end a choice, which is where politics comes in. And some of the reason we're in our current situation is we've made choices that have understressed the importance of the trades and training people to get them into it. So there's obviously that role as well. The overall breakdown of how economists think about things really falls into two buckets. There's, I think, the biggest bucket and the least controversial, which is just what's happening. And that comes down to really understanding what the top lines are in movement of economy. So if you want to look at HVAC, a really simple one is how many people are performing HVAC work. That's not really a number that anybody truly knows, but economists will try and estimate it and come up with it. If you want to think about, well, what are people being paid to do HVAC work? Well, then you've got a similar sort of question. Nobody really knows. If you're an accountant at a big HVAC company, you can know what you roughly pay your own people, but you don't have perfect information of what your competitors are doing or what people are doing in different parts of the country. And then there's the second piece of what economists think about, which is why is something happening. So there's the first is the what is happening, and that's a little bit more straightforward. It really is just measurement. And then the second part, the why, or what causes something, is where you get into trickier areas of inference and thinking about problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fascinating. Yeah, one of the things that I want to delve into in this interview as we get further along here is why the impression, if you will, of skilled trades in America especially is, skilled trades are basically the consolation prize. There's an attitude out there amongst the general public that, if all else fails and, your college situation didn't turn out as you planned, you can always become a plumber or an HVAC guy. It's sort of a kind of a afterthought that a skilled trade is actually something that could be a career venue for you. I want to talk about some of the key takeaways. So I'm on the screen here. You guys are listening audio only in your trucks out there. I'm going to put a link to Mischa's article of this 2021 skilled trades in America article that he put out on Angie, and I'm going to post that link to it so you can check it out. But what I'm on is page 4 of this thing, and it talks about the top line takeaways, and these are the ones about interest in skilled trades that really hit me in the forehead. It says here, number 1, job satisfaction remains remarkably high, with 83% of the tradespeople either somewhat or extremely satisfied in their choice of work. That's huge. I mean, that's a significant number.
That's really huge, and it's something that people don't market enough about the trades, and that's why we really wanted to focus in that report we put out last year about this is a real opportunity, because there's a lot of people who are quitting jobs and changing jobs because they're dissatisfied. And the most unique thing about that stat isn't just that it's so high, but if you dig into the primary reason why people are listing their satisfaction, because people might say that they're very dissatisfied, and we asked them to, what's the primary reason? And we asked people who are neutral, what's the primary reason for your answer? But the primary reason for people who are extremely satisfied, the top reason why they say this is what's driving it, is that they find meaning and value in their work. Mm-hmm. And that is something that everybody is searching for right now. We've gotten comfortable enough with economic growth where there's less motivation for a lot of younger generations in particular to strictly pursue salaries. And they also really want to know that at the end of the day, their work means something and that it improves somebody else's life. And, if you're thinking about HVAC work, there's no ambiguity about what you did today. I mean, you know that a family or an apartment complex or workers are now all of a sudden much more comfortable tomorrow because you fixed or installed a really good system and you did your work well. And that's harder to tell if you're doing other things where you spend all day in a cubicle sending emails to people, or now people, spend their time at home in their pajamas sending emails to people. But either way, the impact of your work is hidden from you. You don't necessarily know that what you're doing actually has much meaning and value. Whereas with the trades, no matter what it is, you really, really see it on an immediate and recurring basis.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one, that number 5, that really, got my attention, which this is one of those ones everybody kind of knows it, but we've never really seen it in writing often. It says here, the skilled trades are aging, with median age in skilled trades is 43 years. It's roughly 10% older than the general population. So this has shown an interesting trend line here, right? I mean, mm-hmm. You got people leaving and not coming in, which is causing a reduction in the population of people actually willing to perform skilled trade work, right?
Yeah, it's doing a couple of things. So obviously there's that impact. There's just fewer people who are around to train new entrants. But it also, because people are entering at a later age as well, that's one big shift we've seen. Is in that same report, we highlight the fact that current workers, the most common age they entered was between 16 and 20, but the age where they see other people entering, the most common age, is closer to 30. And that's because people go to college and then they find a career that they don't love, and then they move into a secondary career that they realize they enjoy more. And what that does is it reduces the total amount of lifetime work that you can do, because there's X amount of consumer demand out there, right? Consumers want to spend so much money and there's so much demand for services, and you've got so much work you can do in a lifetime. Mm-hmm. And so if we take that lifetime of work and we shorten it by 12 years, then we are actually reducing the overall capacity of the trades, and you need more people to enter to make up for that. So there's a couple of things going on, but that also feeds into a secondary consequence, which is that if you look at certain categories, particularly among business owners and among general contractors, they're even older than that average. That average of 43 or 44 is brought down by the fact that there's lots of young roofers and framers out there. Mm-hmm. But on some of these other trades, because the age is older, those people are starting to think about retirement. Right. And that's a big entrepreneurial opportunity for anybody who wants to get in now or has already been in for a couple of years, spend that 10 years of really learning the business, and then all of a sudden you've got a competitive landscape that's improving as that big glut of people start to retire or to think about what they want to go on to afterwards. Maybe they want to sell their business, or maybe they just exit entirely. That sort of remains to be seen, and it'll be vary by market. But it's a big entrepreneurial opportunity.
Wow, I never thought of it like that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, the general public has to know that. I mean, maybe right now because of, we're coming out of COVID and, everybody's sort of, the reporting is that there's supply chain issues and, that type of thing. I got a feeling though, the supply chain things as they get worked out, in other words, we're able to get products, there's still going to be a shortage on the services side. So even though you can get the parts you need to fix air conditioners or fix a plumbing system, and even the prices may come down on those materials a little bit, there's still going to be probably a big hangover of the fact that I think there's a good amount of people in the trades that said, I'm at retirement age. I think I'm going to retire. I actually know a lot of contractors that have had journeyman level technicians leave because they just, they didn't want to, they were at a point, they made enough money in their career, they just wanted to retire. They're not coming back. And the general public right now, if they want to get their air conditioner fixed or the washer, or, replaced or something like that, they kind of know now it's going to be a long wait. But I got a feeling that even though they'll be able to get their refrigerators and they'll be able to get their new heat pump equipment, they still may find that they got to wait a couple months because the contractors that are going to do the installation, they may have the access to the equipment, but they don't have the people to put it in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely going on. I think consumers are a little bit wiser to it, but it's not something we should be okay with, right? I mean, that's not the story of how economics is supposed to work. You don't go out there wanting to buy a new phone and, have the electronics store sell you, well, we think you can get you one in 6 to 8 months. That's not, you want to go in and get it. Markets are supposed to clear as in economics terms, which means that supply and demand equalize based on price. And I think a couple of things are going on. One is that people are reticent to expand. And, that's obviously, I think a lot of people still have a memory of the last recession when housing and the specialty residential trades in particular got really hit hard by that. So there's probably some lingering memory, but that was a very unique recession, and I don't see any reason why that needs to happen again. There's certainly no fundamentals reason why it should happen again. And then the other thing that's going on is there's a cultural thing in the trades where people are hesitant to raise prices, right? I mean, that's the way normal markets work, is if, the price of your phone is the price that the company thinks it can charge and still clear the, and still make a baseline number of sales. But in the trades, rather than sort of raising prices until you have a standard backlog, people just sort of stop taking new clients for a while. And that's a unique thing, and some of it's tied obviously into the nature of the work. It's harder to ramp it up and ramp it down in the same way a factory can. But certainly I think that there is kind of a cultural component that goes in there too, where because it's a very personal face-to-face business, people don't always feel comfortable doing that, and I'm not sure that that's always the right approach. I think sometimes the industry needs to sort of think a little bit more carefully about whether or not it needs to raise prices in certain cases to actually get closer to that market clearing mechanism where the supply and demand actually equalize over a shorter window of time, because very few other industries that you can look at and see people saying, no, I'm sorry, I'm just not taking clients.
Yeah. So when you were doing your research for this 2021 article, was there anything, is this the first time you've done an article of this type for Angie?
It's the second year we did the Skilled Trades in America, which is our sort of specific research piece looking at what's going on in the skilled trades. The first year we looked at the entrepreneurial opportunity. That was sort of pre-COVID, where we looked at the cultural phenomenon that we tend to view an entrepreneur right now as somebody in a hoodie with some clean sneakers sitting in a coffee shop with a laptop, right? That's kind of the story we've told ourselves of an entrepreneur. But that's a very limited story. The entrepreneur is also somebody out there with a truck who's running a business and scaling it and growing it. That requires putting more capital at risk, just as much innovation and hard work and hustle and salesmanship. So it requires all those same things. We just haven't told that story. And so we tried to sort of really focus on that element with that report. The following year, the updated version, which is what we're looking at right now, we tried to focus on this career satisfaction point because so many people right now are quitting their jobs. That's a very topical point to make because a lot of people enter these trades. I grew up in rural British Columbia. My father worked for the power company as a lineman. A lot of the people that he saw coming into the apprentice and journeyman programs for the power company to be linemen all had gone to college, all had done other things, and all realized that they would make considerably more money and have a considerably happier time working being a lineman than they would having their white collar job. And so that's one of the things we're trying to really highlight.
Yeah. Now, was there anything that surprised you when you wrote this 2021 article? Like, wow, that's interesting. I mean, you're used to looking at a lot of data, I'm sure, but was there anything that when you were working up the data for this article that, like, wow, I had no idea. Was there any aha moments like that in there?
I think the biggest aha moment for me is the recruitment piece because I think, and it's also, it's an area where I'm going to be a little bit critical of how we've expanded the pipeline. I would have thought that people would be thinking more about how we can pull more people in, engaging more with their local school boards, their local elected officials, and that doesn't happen. And I understand why it's not immediately relevant to your business. So it is a complete sunk cost if you decide to take the time to go talk to your local school board about trying to create trades programs or talk to your local elected officials about the incentives we've set up to send kids to college instead of sending them into the trades. And on both of those things, people just in the trades are not active enough, and we really have to think about that pipeline and how we pull people in because we need to be doing a better job, everybody. And I think, if you're listening right now and you haven't done that, that's the beautiful thing about our system is you have that freedom to go and engage. Just because somebody doesn't take your meeting the first time doesn't mean you can't be persistent. Get that meeting with your local state rep, your local state senator, your congressman, your U.S. senator, your governor, your county board members, whoever. Make that effort. Team up with some friends you have at some competitor companies and do the same thing. See if you can get a group of people together to just be engaged more in the process to make sure that the trades have a seat at the table when it comes to that policy making and how we encourage young people to get into the trades.
Man, I could not have said that better myself. I got a tear running down my cheek right now. That is great. Yeah, that's exactly where I think things need to be. I mean, what's really interesting when I started out when I was in high school, I was in my automotive class, back in the day when they taught, wood shop, metal shop, automotive, and wood shop. Yeah, all the shop classes. And it seems like shortly after I graduated, which was a long time ago, they did away with those. And in my story, I was a, high school senior with dyslexia, and I got through high school, I graduated, but I really struggled. So I knew I was not really destined, at least initially, to go through college. I ended up doing it in reverse, but we had a rep come in from a trade school down in Arizona, and he was pitching auto diesel. And by the way, we have this other course called HVAC, right? And I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. Hey guys, quick announcement. If you have not stopped into our website at skilledtraderescue.com, please do that. On the home page here, you will see that we have the Join the Movement email list. If you haven't signed up, please consider doing that. We have some amazing guests lined up for the podcast. I'm going to be getting the stories out of successful technicians and business owners in skilled trades. These are not just HVAC people. These are going to be from across the skilled trade spectrum. And my hope is that I'm going to be able to draw out of these people the things that have worked in their careers amazingly well, and the things that if they had a chance to talk to their younger self, what they would tell them not to do. So I want to share all that stuff with you. And if you sign up, you're going to be the first to know when we drop those new podcast episodes. Also, coming soon, we have the BEST workshop. It's a 5-day automated email workshop. However, you're going to give content to us through that workshop. You're going to get one-on-one feedback from our instructors, and we're looking to better your career. I've been teaching the BEST process for many, many years, about 2 decades, one-on-one, and I'm going to be trying to do that to the masses through this workshop. It's totally free. All you got to do is sign up, and as soon as you do that, you'll get alerts on your email as soon as these new podcasts come in, as well as the BEST workshop. So if you check it out, I will put a link to the website on the show notes for this episode today. So check it out. It just seems in the public school system these days, there's just no, the people making decisions on the budgets for what curriculum they're going to teach in schools. Shop is, an afterthought. They don't do it as much anymore here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the way that economists tend to view the world is if you want to see what's happening and understand it, you are getting the product of the incentives that are out there. So right now, the thing we're getting is a product of the incentives we've set in place. So if you don't like what you're seeing, you need to change the incentives. And right now, people are incentivized to take debt that is very cheap up front and go and get a college degree without a lot of guidance over what the payoff is, or how much the job satisfaction is, or are there real jobs in the back end that you can actually jump into. And we need to change those incentives. So that's a big part of it. And the other thing is to recognize that we've culturally placed, I think, a lot of attention on other forms of happiness that don't necessarily have the same holding power as building something yourself. The best analogy I have is I like to build furniture on the weekends. So, I've got a decent number of tools in the garage shop, and I've got friends with bigger spaces that we use to build larger things. And that's a really fun way to spend evening and weekend time. I don't know a lot of furniture builders who spend their weekends sitting in front of computers building applied stats models, because one is fundamentally more fun than the other. Yeah. And as much as I enjoy what I do, I enjoy the woodworking more. And the story that we should tell people is, if you want to be happy, building things is a really meaningful way to do it. And the best way to tell that story is to have people actually do that in high school or in elementary school or in middle school, and to get that focus on it. Because I grew up in a rural area, I was on a farm, and so we had some of those farm activities. And then we also, of course, did have shop class when I was in high school, but I think that was pretty rare.
Now, you mentioned about, the contractor community, or people who have interest in skilled trades, whoever those people are, getting out and talking to school boards and talking to people that educate our youth. What other ideas, have you spent any time thinking about, all right, how do we change the mindset that I mentioned early on in this interview about, skilled trades are just the consolation prize, if you will, for a career. I mean, is there any other ideas maybe, other economists, yourself, have pondered about on what the public or what interested people could do to sort of start to change that perception? I know Mike Rowe's trying to do that, the Dirty Jobs guy. He's talking about that a lot. But is there any other ideas that people who want to be cheerleaders for skilled trades could try doing and making a change in the attitude?
There's a couple of different things. You're right, Mike Rowe's been doing a great job of getting that message out there, and in part just telling the story of the upper limit of what you can earn is a lot. So there's that component of it too. Certainly, I think telling the job satisfaction piece is important, but some people, even if in the end what'll make them happy is job satisfaction, they might be motivated by money up front. And so obviously tell the story of the fact that people can make great money in these fields, and you don't have to get a bunch of college debt while you do it, and you don't have to miss time out of the workforce while you do it. So there's that component of it too. The other thing that we need to do is recognize that we're not pulling in a broad enough swath of the economy, because a lot of the recruitment into the trades relies on word of mouth. That's something else we've seen, is that that's still the number one thing people use. But when you've got a demographic that is aging and you're trying to pull in young people, word of mouth isn't going to do a very good job. The other issue that we have is half the population is women, and about 1 in 20 to 1 in 25 tradespeople is women. When we look at the women in the trades, the job satisfaction is just as high as the men. The pay bump relative to other sectors is just as high. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think the big thing is we just have to create a more intentional pathway, because people don't really think of it as an option. But there are lots of women tradespeople out there that are sort of telling the story of the fact that they pursued it as a career, and it's great and they enjoy it. So there's definitely more of that we should do as well, because it's harder to be taken seriously when you say that you've got a trade labor shortage and then 50% of the population basically doesn't even exist in the workforce. So that's one piece that we can change. And the other thing that I think we can change about it too is the social media component. I like to pick on social media a lot because there's sort of growing evidence that it doesn't make people super happy consuming it. But one of the silver linings of social media is that there's lots of people on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and all these other sorts of things that are really telling the story of the trades in a pretty cool way. Right. And so that's kind of an organic from the ground up movement. And I think it's working pretty well. I think you've got a lot of influencers who've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers on these various platforms, and are showing themselves building things and renovating things and installing things and going through the technical aspects of what's involved to nail the install on an HVAC system and all the different things you've got to think about in terms of air pressure and how you're controlling your water vapor and your air barriers and all those sorts of things. And that's pretty cool, and I think that's kind of already happening. I don't think that that's really a policy lever. That's just a keep it up kind of moment.
You're right. There are some really good influencers out there, particularly like on YouTube and LinkedIn, that are just doing some amazing things. I think if let's say a couple more percentage of the technicians out there were to take a little bit of time and just post their personal experience in skilled trades, I think that would slowly turn the ship. There's just not enough voices out there yet on social media saying, hey, skilled trades are actually something that would be something you should really take a close look at.
Hmm.
So I put up on the screen here another graphic I wanted to get your input on. I came across this one, and the data, it's real hard to see at the bottom, but the data from this came from NCES ED.gov, I don't know what that is, and then our friends at BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I thought this was really interesting because it gave sort of the pathway between trade schools versus traditional college. Now, one of the things I have a feeling this was slanted kind of towards skilled trades because the college experience, there's many pathways. You could do a JC, for 2 years and then jump over and finish out at a regular, a 4-year college. So that there's a lot of variables probably on both sides of this. But a couple things on this graphic, and by the way, I'll put a link to this on the show notes, is the skilled trade is going to be significantly faster. So a lot of people don't realize going to, once you graduate from high school, you can actually get to work and start making money. They say 2 years versus 4 years. And then the cost, this graphic, shows the average cost for trade schools, $33,000 compared to $127,000. And then the big one that really got my attention was the graduation rate for people that choose to go to trade school is 98.4% versus, and the one I didn't even know, I blew my mind, only 60% of the people that go to college actually graduate. What's your impression of the data presented on this graphic here? Do you think it's halfway accurate?
I think there's some accuracy in that for sure. I think that the challenge with understanding this data is twofold. The first is variability. If you're thinking about the college experience, right, we're lumping it into one, and even I've done that on this conversation. But the college conversation is highly variable. And certain majors at certain schools are a great deal. If you can get into those programs and get through them, that's a remarkable deal. Now, whether or not you'll like the work on the other side is a separate story. I know lots of friends that have gotten into very exclusive programs and then have gone to the exclusive jobs afterwards, and then they've quit those jobs the second all their debt was paid off because they hated those jobs, even though they were very, very lucrative. So there's that story. But the other piece that's going on is, well, how much of that is telling the story of the trades accurately? I think that we get trades wages wrong. I don't think that the government measures it entirely accurately. I think it understates how much people earn in the trades for a number of reasons. I think some of that's probably because there's a certain cash component that's under the table. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing from a measurement perspective, but I think it's important to recognize that probably does happen. The other thing is that people choose to work fewer hours and they choose to live in lower cost areas. So that's another big piece with the trades is if you go into law school and you get at a big law firm, you have got to live in the downtown of an expensive city to maintain that lifestyle. Whereas in the trades, you can kind of choose wherever you want and then drive into your jobs on your own schedule. And if you want to take the winter months off to go fishing in Tahiti, that's your call. And, I know people that do that. So there's that component of it as well. I do think it is very important to recognize that the tuition and the upfront cost is lower. The dropout rate is also typically lower. It sort of, again, depends on the colleges and the majors. But if you go to college for 3 or 4, 3 years, and then you drop out, you can have a lot of debt and then you don't get that premium because the premium comes from graduating. It's not a linear time thing where you get 25% of the benefit from college every year. You've got to complete the whole thing or you don't really get much benefit at all. So if you drop out in the 3rd year and you've racked up 3 years of debt, you're in a much worse place than if you had not gone to begin with. And with the trades, that's not necessarily the case. And then you also, with the trades, don't have what economists call an opportunity cost. And that is not necessarily your monetary cost of doing something, but it's what was the cost of not doing something else. So if you would have been out there in the field hustling and making 60 grand a year as a 18-year-old for 4 years, well, that's gross 240K in earnings. That's all gone if you're spending those same 4 years not earning a penny. So there's an opportunity cost that also has to be factored in. So if you look at a lot of majors and you say, okay, what's the total cost of that? And then what are the lifetime earnings? And you stack that up against starting 4 years earlier. So you skip that opportunity cost. You don't pay all the tuition out of pocket, and you pick a good trade in a good area. Yeah, you're definitely coming ahead with a lot of trades over a lot of college majors. That's not universally true, right? There's a superstar effect. Some majors can be very, very lucrative. And if you do go work for that big law firm or that big technology company, you can make great money and maybe do better than the average tradesperson. But not everybody gets those opportunities.
Hey guys, I have an exciting announcement. We just recently made some updates to our 3 most popular online courses at processchilleracademy.com. If you're a technician that's looking to improve your skills a little bit, maybe get some specialized training to be of more value to your customers and your employer, or if you are an employer, a contractor that is looking to augment your existing in-house training with online training that can be accessible from any device, this is a really great opportunity. Just go to processchilleracademy.com, just scroll down on the homepage and you will see the course area. If you go into the course page, you will see that we are currently, for a limited time, we have a promo code of Chiller Pro that will save you 25% on any one of these courses. So I hope you check it out, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in class. What do you think about exposure to outsourcing? So one of the things that I think gets missed a lot, and I really want to hear your opinion on this. So you get a high school graduate, and boy or girl, doesn't matter, they want to be a game designer or a graphics designer or a coder. Even a lot of the politicians talk about, go out and be a coder and learn how to do that. And they decide to do that, but there's a lot of college degrees that are relatively expensive to get, take the traditional 4 or 5, maybe 6 years, depending on the student, and they go out in the field and they get a job, and there's always a pretty big risk of that job getting outsourced, because the young folks here, graduates here, they have to compete with much, much cheaper labor overseas, primarily because a lot of countries, as far as I know, they pay for a lot more of the, a lot of educations are heavily subsidized in other countries, more so than here. And you get a computer science major coming out writing code for Oracle or whatever, they can easily get outsourced to a number of countries. Whereas skilled trades, I'm talking about HVAC in particular, you get a chiller mechanic, somebody who's trained to work on 500-ton and up centrifugal chillers. That chiller's not getting outsourced. Once it gets landed in a building, you're not outsourcing that to another country, right?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that we have talked about, is there's less room for automation, less room for outsourcing. Now, both of those things are contentious debates within both economics and policy circles about what's going on, what's the long-term net effect of it. And I don't necessarily have a concrete answer for that. I think that economists have certainly gotten some of that story wrong over the last 20 or 30 years, because we've simply looked at the story of, well, if manufacturing gets outsourced, the price of your product just went down by 30%, so you're better off, even though some people lost their jobs. Now we're starting to recognize, well, if we've got an opioid epidemic that's killed hundreds of thousands of people, and part of that is that people have lost that satisfaction they got from a career, does that 30% benefit that you get in reduced prices actually pay for that? And clearly the answer is no. So there's an ongoing debate there about sort of what happens in the future. But certainly I think it's true that you've got to be very careful at doing your career planning by looking not just at what's the situation right now, but where's the situation going. And the look forward piece of that is pretty critical. And yeah, I don't see any meaningful way where somebody's going to be outsourcing HVAC technician jobs, because that's literally not feasible. Now, I'm sure that the industry will have to adapt like every other one. The only constant is change. And with all of these things, it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that every dollar you pay is a dollar somebody else is earning, right? We're all every expenditure is somebody else's income, and every dollar of your income was something that somebody else would have loved to have paid you less because it's coming out of their scarce resources. So it is a big, complex, integrated system that you have to think about in that sense as well. But certainly the quick answer is, yeah, I don't see how it gets outsourced.
Economics is just so amazing. It's just incredible. I mean, it's necessary because it gives you the ability to see around corners. But on the flip side of it, economics and numbers can be bent and twisted, and it could be just as wrong as right. It's just fascinating endeavor for me to understand.
Sure, and that is the right way to view it. Is be skeptical of everybody's numbers. Double check my math too. It's science is a consensus process, not a single expert process. So you get a range of opinions, and forecasting the future is very, very difficult. So lots of people are almost always wrong, but there's a consensus view that is typically right more often than it's wrong in the long run.
Right. So you made a pretty good segue, I think, Mischa, over into one of the last topics that I want to talk about, and you referenced this you commented on this already a couple times in our discussion. What I have up on the screen here for my audio only guys, again, you should check this podcast episode out on video too, because there's a lot of stuff on the screen here as well. But I'm going to try to create a word picture for everybody out there. What I'm looking at here is a particular page from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The matter of fact, if you just Google 49-9021, that's the report number from BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics. And this particular article is, I believe, the latest study. Is called the Occupational Employment and Wages, and this is May 2020. I haven't seen I think this is the last one that they do. I think they do this every 2 years, if I remember right. Anyway, this is the wage data for heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration mechanics and installers. So the first takeaway that I got from this thing is they're mixing installers from technicians, or what they call mechanics. And that, right from the get-go, from the jump, is going to create an inaccuracy, because typically in the HVAC realm, service technicians are going to make a relatively higher wage than installers do. Not in all cases, but they typically would do. And then the other thing is their sample data is 344,020 people or individuals, I'm assuming, and they've got a mean hourly wage of $25.68, and or a mean annual wage of $53,410, and it's just wrong. There's just no way that's right. And before I let you respond to that, Mischa, because I'm dying to hear your answer on this, I ran a poll, and this is very unscientific. Okay, this is just a LinkedIn poll, and it shows the journeyman. What I did is I said, hey, U.S.-based journeyman wages, what do you guys pay? Now, there was 229 people out of the 6,500 that looked at this thing, and unfortunately, the LinkedIn poll only allows 4 different criteria. So I started at $20 an hour, and I went all the way up to $35.01 and over. And interestingly enough, so $20 to $25 was 2% of who responded. $25.01 to $30 was 5%. $30.01 to $35 was 12%, and then over $35.01 was 81%, right? So I'm assuming, if you extrapolate that a little bit, journeyman technicians or journeyman HVAC people are making far and above $35 an hour, which sort of blows away the data. And then I went one step further, Mischa. I went into the FAQ of the site, which I'm not going to bore everybody with the details on that, and the collection parameters that they use to get this data is, I mean, it's really out there. They call and they send mailers out to companies, and you know how that goes. I mean, I don't, what they should do, I think, is tie into ADP or one of these big payroll houses, and extrapolate their data from there. So I'm going to shut up. You give me your opinion of what I'm looking at here. Am I totally off base or halfway accurate?
I'll give you the clearest answer any economist will probably ever give you. I think you're accurate. I don't think the numbers are correct. It's not and I don't know if that's going to be controversial to say or not. We'll find out, I suppose. But no, I think that it's a hard thing to measure, and I don't think the BLS gets it exactly right. I've heard that from people in every different trades category saying, I looked at these BLS numbers because I'm trying to get people in, and people say, well, the wages aren't that high. And then I look at the numbers, and the wages, I don't know anybody who's making that little.
Yeah.
And so I think that they are getting it wrong. Some of that could be sample selection. If I'm going to be charitable, then, you do get these distinctions about a contractor versus an employee, because you're going to pay an employee less because you got to pay your payroll taxes and other benefits on top. And so maybe that drives down the rate, or, something along those lines. And that could certainly impact it. But I also think that the nature of the work is just harder to get and fully understand. And like you said, you're integrating different things that have very different wage rates. So how can you trust that statistic, the way that they've pushed those things together? So it's a bunch of different things that I think each individually contributes to a little bit of inaccuracy, and then the total final story is it's more inaccurate. So that's definitely, I think, a good sense on your part that it's not totally
well
obvious.
In their defense, just a little bit, you got to keep in mind that they're collecting data. I mean, if you dig into the actual spreadsheets, which, by the way, you can download from this site, they're collecting data, massive amounts of data. They just are. So you're going to expect in the mix that there's going to be inaccuracies. My criticism, and this is me talking now, not an economist, but my criticism of that is that when the educational community, the colleges and even the high school counselors, when they quote wage data, guess where it comes from? A lot of it comes from this website, and the data that's or other websites that are grabbing this data. And my argument with that is, we've already got a big headwind in the skilled trade perception that it's, like I keep saying, the consolation prize. We've got a big headwind that we're having to deal with already. And this is definitely not helping when the wage data that's quoted is just markedly inaccurate, in my opinion.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't help the situation when you're understating versus overstating it.
Yeah.
We'll see if we can get it better. That's certainly something that's sort of on my radar as something that would be nice to improve if we could, and to get better information out there. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what we can accomplish, but it's that is the truth, quote unquote, in terms of labor market analysis. That is the consensus viewpoint, is the Bureau of Labor Statistics has what is the truth about the number of workers and what they're earning. So it's gonna not turn and change overnight, but I think hopefully we can at least improve the overall understanding of it, because I've heard from, like I said, every different trade category, every single different industry saying these are not correct.
Right. Well, one of the things I'm doing, and I'd be more than happy to share this data with you, again, it's probably going to be really unscientific, but I'm working with Microsoft 365, and we're trying to, and I'm not pitching them at all, but we're working on setting up a national survey where it goes out to all of our listeners. It goes out, it's probably going to be a much bigger sampling than what this little one I showed you on LinkedIn. And we're going to ask more questions. Who's actually who's actually providing us with the data? We're going to put a form out there they fill out, and then we're going to parse all the data into an Excel spreadsheet. So it's going to be very interesting to see what comes in. I've got some pretty big trade associations and big contractors that are willing to participate in that. So when that data comes out, I'll track you down and share it with you and get your opinion of it.
That'd be wonderful. That sounds like exactly the right way to do it. There's ways to gauge data quality that we can talk about more offline afterwards, but I think that's really exciting, and it's probably overdue.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I can't believe we talked for 45 minutes already, Mischa. So is there anything you would like to share with the audience about maybe how to educate themselves on more on skilled trades, maybe to talk to some of the parents out there that have maybe junior, senior year boys and girls in high school that are looking at career choices now. I mean, is there anything you'd like to share?
There's a couple of things. The first is we don't pick up a big effect from parents saying that they're closed-minded to their kids going into the trades. We have asked that of parents, and they've said that they're comfortable with it. Now, obviously, what people say and what they actually think are not always the same thing, but we've got no reason to necessarily be skeptical that it's off that much. So parents are open to it. And really highlight that job satisfaction and the fact that wages are higher and that you can start your own business pretty easily in the trades relative to other areas, right? It's pretty difficult to go out and start up a manufacturing firm from scratch or a big law firm from scratch, but in the trades you can start up your own business and work for yourself pretty easily. And I think that entrepreneurial piece is really part of it. So wages, job satisfaction, entrepreneurship are sort of the big three. And then the other thing is if you want to sort of stay up to date on more research, obviously you can go to angie.com/research. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I really am an open book there, so reach out anytime. I try and be as accessible as possible, even though, as you know, I'm sometimes a little delayed. I do love to hear from people, get their thoughts, get their feelings. If I miss the mark, I like to know that too. If you think I'm wrong about something, please let me know. If you've got an idea for other areas of research, let me know there too. And I also try and update people on what's going on in the market in both areas.
Do you surf your messages on LinkedIn very much, Mischa?
Yeah, I try and get through them at least once a week. It's the volume is not nothing, but I try and get through it once a week.
Okay.
Obviously, travel weeks are a little bit worse than others.
Yeah, what's the best way if somebody listening to the podcast has a question, comment, concern? What's the best way for people to reach you? Is it on LinkedIn or through the website, or how can people reach you?
Either or. LinkedIn will come to me directly through the website. It'll filter to me eventually, but either or. I try and be really accessible on both.
Okay, sounds good. Well, that's excellent. Mischa, thank you so much. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And I think that my audience out there is going to get a lot of data. And I would encourage those of you listening, if you're listening to the audio only portion of it, to get a chance to check out the video, which will be up on YouTube. And we'll have links to our website that will also have the audio and video portions of this episode available, and that will be available in a couple of weeks. So that is it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I very much look forward to continuing to connect with you. Please don't hesitate to send me messages on LinkedIn. I'm on there all the time. Or you can reach out to me on my email. I'm at mking@processdrilleracademy.com. And until next week, when I give you the next installment, I wish you a great week, and I will connect up with you again soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.